So on paper, metaphorically, this pen has everything going against it. But on paper, literally, we love this. Hello and welcome to Stationery Test Drive with Inky Memo, where we look at tools and implements and fun things in the world of stationery.
Today we're looking at the reed pen, which, if you think about it, the history of the reed pen is actually very much the history of writing. So this is quite a, impressive looking instrument.
I'm Samir.
Speaking of impressive instruments, he's Samir. I'm Vishal.
This is Minjal.
And just like the reed pen is impressive, it's also old, just like us.
We do establish that in every episode.
Yes, we are elder millennials and borderline Gen Xers and other things like that. And just like us, this one is a really surprising and strange and old implement. A reed pen kind of just is that. It's a reed. It's a piece of grass that has been dried out and carved into being a writing tool. In some ways, it might be the oldest writing tool.
It's definitely one of the oldest writing tools. It's called a reed pen in general. I think across the world, depending on where you are, it's made using either a reed, which is a grass, or a piece of bamboo, which is most likely what these are made of. And so that pretty much covers most of the geography of the world. You will find either one of those two, which is why it was such a widespread instrument. Before even writing in the modern form was possible or invented with ink, reed pens were used even to put writing into clay tablets.
Cuneiform.
Right. And in which case it was just used as an instrument to make indentations in the clay rather than actually writing on it with an ink.
And this particular one is a completely simple one. There is only one cut. There's no, like what you would think of as a quill would have like a gouge down the center maybe to split it and act almost as a reservoir. This one is literally just a wedge, and we kind of used it as such. That's what we do. We're artists and designers and calligraphers. So the test drive part of Stationery Test Drive is that we take these tools that many times we're unfamiliar with. I've certainly never encountered in my professional or personal career a reed pen until suddenly it just kind of showed up as this curio. But I've learned to use it for my kind of work, which is illustration. And this is what I ended up with. I loved it. It's let's get the one sort of the big elephant in the room out. It's hard to control, and that is a feature, not a bug. We've looked at so many implements on this channel that are good and surprisingly easy. We looked at some children's sketch pens, a few felt tip markers a couple of episodes ago that were so much better than the ones we used as kids. But this tool is not easy to use. It's not even easy to figure out what to use it with. This is on cartridge paper, and I used Sumi ink, which is a India ink. So it's like a carbon black based ink, which is very thick and tacky and takes a while to dry. And you can get maybe like from there to there before your line kind of fizzles out. And that's fine. I kind of want to say it's good how hard to predict this is, because when you're doing work like this, it frees you up. And also it gives you interesting accidents, happy accidents. Sometimes there'll be a splodge, or sometimes you'll get a thinner line than you thought, a thicker line than you thought. But yeah, I really loved it. This is a great tool, not just for sketching and things like that. Maybe there's a way to do it in a more controlled manner, a more uh, or let's dare I say it, calligraphic manner, which maybe we'll see soon. So, Minjal, you're the resident professional calligrapher. I just doodle. So, show me what a controlled hand can do. And that is much more controlled. Same pen, same reed, same instrument, different ink though.
Yes, I do like using the Ecoline watercolor inks. I usually end up making most of my pieces for the test drive with this ink. And also, may I add that these pens were actually gifted by your dad?
Yes. So
Because I know that he is, as big a stationery enthusiast, as we are. He's constantly looking up, these kind of tools online, and whenever he finds something, I know that he shares a link with me.
So the story of this is that my dad came across a listing on Facebook, I think, or a post on Facebook by someone who was just selling these via mail order, and we just took a chance, and they came in a set of 5 of different gauges.
They're different nib sizes.
Yeah, I don't know how accurate they are to any, let's say, standard measure of maybe they're 5 and 4 but it kind of doesn't matter to my kind of work. It does clearly to yours for when you want to get these sorts of things. Tell us about how the inks reacted to this pen.
So before I actually came down to the Ecoline, I used the Parker ink.
That's a fountain pen ink.
That's a fountain pen ink. I also use the Sheffer ink, which is again a fountain pen ink. They didn't really work very well for me because I think they were not easy to blend with. And also I had the problem of too much ink on the paper with that. Now Ecoline, because it is watery, in consistency, it was easier to blend. It was easier to actually, like you were saying, you have to kind of follow the pace of this particular, implement.
Right.
You can't really force lines, or, you can't really expect it to work in a particular way.
I agree with you, but I also think that maybe you didn't encounter this when you are going for these more controlled lines, but one of the very freeing things I found about this is I could just like randomly doodle and get a certain level of just chaos to it.
So I was thinking, if I had to do more structured work, like if I had to actually say write, an invitation with this or something like that, I would probably not use this, because you cannot really control the ink flow at all, and you have to constantly keep dipping it, in the ink source. And sometimes for a calligrapher that can be very disconcerting because you lose your flow while you're doing that.
Okay, I think it works then as an illustration tool because your flow gets interrupted, and sometimes you need to interrupt that flow.
The other thing that we need to cover is that most reed pens, I believe these days at least, come in this form without a central channel, as Vishal was mentioning. And you will actually find quite a few videos on YouTube about how to take one of these and add in the channel. Okay. Traditionally, I think two reed pens were probably made this way by kind of the first level artisan, and then the scribe would sit down and make the little channel themselves.
Okay.
So that was part of the skill of being a scribe.
You kind of personalize how you like your...
Because the thing about this is, if you cut even a little too far, the entire pen splits. So it's a very specific skill to be able to make that cut and maybe drill a little bit of a hole here, like you would in a modern metal nib, and then hold on to that. But as we have seen, you can always use it without doing that at all.
And what are the advantages of putting that? Is it just the reservoir, or can you?
I think split? By putting in that the split and the hole as a mini reservoir, it would probably
hold more. It would hold ink for a longer time, so you don't have to keep dipping it.
Yeah, and especially for work like Minjal's, then you would get more of that smooth line without having to dip it too many times.
So on paper, metaphorically, this pen has everything going against it, but on paper, literally, we love this. Did you love it, Samir?
I absolutely loved it, and I think I ended up doing somewhere of a mix between what Vishal did and Minjal did, in that I tried to do both a controlled line and complete wild.
Yours is in many ways the most painterly of these three.
Yes, and I think that happened because as I'm an illustrator and designer as well, so my natural instinct when I begin with anything is to draw out very illustrated controlled lines, and you can see some of that in areas like that. But as I started using this more, I just realized that I was using it more like a brush than like a pen. And the rest of this, if you see the lower half of this mostly, is very brush-like. Because I found that because we were dealing with sort of an entire surface that was just kind of absorbing in the ink without a specific channel.
It's almost like painting with your fingernail, and I know that sounds off-putting, but
yes, but you can, like, the variety of effects you can get because of that. Like, these kind of just dragged out areas, which I did with almost this thing being completely dry, where you just have kind of a hint of color.
Yeah, that's similar with the washes here. This is a washed down, diluted Sumi, but also when it goes down pretty much black, and you think, oh no, but then you just kind of like, you push it and edge it into place, and it kind of...
Right, and then there's areas like this where you can see these little dashes, and that's literally stippling with the edge of this.
Ah, that's lovely.
And when it's almost dry again, so there's just a whole range of things you can do with it wet, with it dry, with it kind of being a little tacky, and of course there's just the variety of inks here.
Yeah, and you used a third kind of ink. We have Sumi ink, we have the Ecolines.
Like Minjal, I tried to use regular fountain pen inks with this and failed. I tried to use some colored Sheffer ink as well, and it just was not holding on to the reed as well as it could. What I ended up using for most of this is, I mean, they're technically inks for writing as well. They're a brand called Krishna inks that are India based and do small batches of very kind of localized special colors. And their ink does have a bit more of a tackiness to it than your standard fountain pen ink, and that's this essentially uses 3 of their colors, and the black was the same Sumi ink that Vishal used. So it was interesting to also see the different thicknesses of ink and the way they react to this instrument.
Also, essentially, I believe, this is how we started, writing, but these are not really beginner-friendly implements, right?
Not at all.
Not if you're the kind of person who wants to achieve something controllable.
Yeah.
And yes, in that ways, most beginners should, and I think would benefit from being able to get something that they can control. For the rest of us, once you're past a certain point, you embrace the chaos of it, like I said, and you can get something out of this that is livelier than most pens.
Yeah, and the strange thing is that people have recognized the fact that this gives you that lively line for a long time. The usefulness of reed pens as a proper writing instrument, was done with probably 1,000 years ago. We invented other things.
So it was the reed pen followed by the quills, followed by the fountain pens?
Exactly.
Okay.
And the quill itself is well over 1,000 years old.
Right.
So these were outdated a very, very long time ago. But you will find drawings by Van Gogh, for example, that use the reed pen. And it's exactly for the kind of line that Vishal has achieved here, which is kind of eccentric.
If we can locate some, we'll put them on screen.
We will have them on screen. Van Gogh did an interesting thing where he mixed sepia ink with graphite, and he drew with that.
Okay.
With a reed pen.
So that's almost approaching a Sumi, which also contains some levels.
So essentially, he took a sepia ink, which which would probably have the same issues we had with fountain pen ink, added in a thicker pigment, which is the graphite, to get something like a Sumi ink, I guess.
Well, then we need to experiment with the sepia inks that we have and the Sumi inks that we have, which is the closest we can get to a graphite thing. Unless you want to spend some time shaving down some graphite into ever finer powder. I think this is one of the better ideation and sketching mediums that I've used in a long time. And by sketching, I do mean rough things that I think these are finished things in many ways, but they are chaotic and things go in places that, like if I did this and then I used, let's say, a Unipin fine liner, it would look fine. But because I knew I did a pencil underdrawing, very light and sketchy. I found that because I knew this was going to behave a certain way, I'd done a few tests before. Maybe I'll show you my test paper on screen because that has a lot of, there's even a little portrait on that I still quite like. Because I knew I was doing this, the way I used the pencil, then the way I held it instead of, like really in there, it was dancing around because I knew that the brush would dance around.
Yeah.
So yeah, it puts you in that kind of mindset when you know what you're going for. I think you, as a beginner, you should also try to inculcate that method of doing things. But also, you can do something very controlled, and Minjal has shown a great degree of control here.
I think the thing that is unique about this, and maybe there are a few older mediums that share that same quality, is that because you know you're not going to get exactly what you can imagine, you learn to work with what you end up getting. And that leaves it a little bit more open to a bit of randomness, a bit of the messy line, a bit of the energy that would come from just chance. Because this is a messy medium.
Yeah, usually in these episodes we test out the actual things, but
this
today
is just this is just a tissue paper that I used only to clean off all the edges of these pens and the spills and the the lids of the bottles. This is a lot of mess to use, and my fingers were completely colored by the end of using this.
Yeah, I have stains from the Sumi ink on my hands. The tactility of them is something that I'd like to talk about because they're kind of these hard, sharp things. I put my Sumi ink in a little palette, and it's kind of nice to you build up this rhythm where you just kind of go and then, into the pair. And that sound.
Yeah, in the beginning, it's extremely disconcerting that you're kind of scratching into the paper rather than gliding over it.
Yeah. And for all the ASMR people out there, if you want, we can make another video of stationery scratchiness.
So that kind of covers the reed pen?
Yeah, I would say that these are inexpensive. We can't really, we'll try to find the person we got it from here in India, but really you can get these anywhere in the world. You can probably find tutorials online to make these in using whatever you have in your local area. You can probably source, I'm sure someone on a fancy website in a first world country has a whole kit which will send you a couple of bamboo sticks and some and a craft knife maybe. You know what, maybe you could just go and get those cheap chopsticks you get from your local takeout and fashion them into some kind of implement. You won't get exactly the kind of wedge and line that we have gotten out of this, but maybe you'll get something fun. And it's such a basic primal thing. I have no qualms in recommending it to anyone and everyone. I think that's covered pretty much everything.
Yes, I think this has been a lot of fun to try out. It's almost like going back in time and looking at something that's a prototype for almost all the other things we have tried.
Yeah. And also being eternally grateful that now we have a fountain pen with a cartridge.
Yeah. There is, as much as this is a great thing, it is an investment of time, of space,
of patience
and tissue paper and cleaning up things, and but it is well worth it. Another thing that is well worth doing is subscribing to our channel, maybe even liking this video, and also subscribe to the Inky Memo newsletter. And you can find most of that at inkymemo.com, as well as at the links on screen and in the description. Next week, we will be back with more primal, modern, and everything in between. More test drives every week, in fact, as long as we can make them. And we hope that you enjoy seeing them as much as we do making them. Until then, I'm Vishal.
I'm Samir.
This is Minjal.
And stick them with the pointy end.